Hey guys, welcome back to the show. So, I'm very excited to be back, and as you can see, or maybe you didn't see, there's been a little bit of a break since we recorded an episode last, and that is mainly because inside of the business, Oh How Healthy, things shifted a little bit. We took our focus off of women solely and put that focus and emphasis on family health and children in particular, their health and well-being. And so this has been a really fun transition, getting healthy with kids in the kitchen and healthy cooking classes and all of the fun that goes into that, and getting kids excited and willing to try new healthy foods in the kitchen has been a really fun transition. So you're going to see a lot of guests on the show that really just revolve around your child's health and well-being and how to get them to be their best selves, while of course including all of the fun little health tips and health hacks that I am known for and love to do, because really when it comes down to it, if we are not being our best and healthy self, then all this other side kind of just falls to the wayside and is not really as beneficial. So health is really the primary emphasis and focus for our busy listeners. So anyway, without further ado, let me introduce our guest today. Her name is Kelly Carino, and she is a pediatric occupational therapist and the owner of Motivated Kids. She's located in Collingswood, New Jersey. And Motivated Kids helps families reduce stress around daily routines by identifying and supporting underlying sensory, motor, and behavioral challenges so that children feel comfortable and confident within their bodies to explore, participate, and engage. So that is Kelly's little bio, and I have to say, we had so much fun chatting on this episode. Kelly is a really amazing and down-to-earth woman. So without further ado, let us start the show. Hi, Kelly. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for joining us. So, Kelly, please introduce yourself to everyone. Tell us all about what you do.
Sure. So my name is Kelly Carino, and I am a pediatric occupational therapist, and I own a pediatric occupational therapy practice in Collingswood, New Jersey, and it's called Motivated Kids. And we work with families to, whenever there's any kind of disruption or in family routines or activities, we help families kind of figure out why their child might be struggling, or why their child might not be participating in certain family routines and tasks. And then we kind of dig down and look at, internal systems, sensory systems, nervous systems, motor systems, to really identify kind of the root cause of whatever challenge they have brought to the table. And we really help them to support their child in growth, decrease stress, and really promote positive participation and relationships, between family members, peers. I could go on and on.
Yeah. I have to say, though, I love that your business is called Motivated Kids, and the OT in the middle of motivated is capitalized to emphasize the occupational therapist. I love it. I always remember it. It's so clever.
Oh, yes, thank you.
All right, so you said systems that are going on within the child that might be causing issues or just certain things in their daily routine, right? So how might that manifest or show up in their daily life?
Yeah, good question. So when we think about occupations, I always tell families to think about, what is an individual's role, right? Is it so that's kind of the first step in identifying an occupation. Are you a child? Are you a sibling? Are you a student, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we think about those roles, what kind of daily routines do we have to participate in or get through in order to fulfill those roles, right? So I'll kind of speak more to home, because school occupational therapists are really focused on the school aspect, like fine motor skills. But in my practice, we're looking more at what's happening in the home. So when we think about things that we have to do at home, we think about things like self-care, bath time, getting dressed, mealtime, transitioning between different activities and routines. And then what we do is we look at what is the child able to do and what is the child not able to do. And then when we look at the parts of the routines that they're not able to do, we start to dig down and kind of dissect that like task. You know, is it that they're not sitting at the dinner table because they have really weak, you know, strength in their hands and fingers and they don't know how to use a fork? Is it that, you know, their body just wants so much movement and they can't sit still, and sitting at the dinner table makes them feel like they're crawling out of their own skin? You know, is it that they can transition between, you know, playtime into dinner time because they're just not sure what's going to be for dinner, and that uncertainty is, you know, giving them anxiety or, you know, feelings of being nervous. And then once we're able to identify that, that's where we can start to put in supports. So a lot of times families will come to me, and it will either be, I would say the majority of time, it's either, oh, you know, we're having a really hard time in the morning, or, you know, like, anytime at night, we can't get them to bed, you know, and then they'll describe things like, you know, it's like we have to wrestle an alligator to get his teeth brushed, or, you know, things like that, or you know, my child only eats 2 things, you know. So a lot of times families come to me with almost what most people I think would consider like a behavior concern. You know, and I don't mean behavior as in like you're a naughty kid, but more like just anything we can observe. And then what we do is we look at, again, like, what is happening in the child? Is it you know, do I need to assess their motor skills? Do I need to assess their sensory system to figure out, basically the goal is to figure out like what part of this task is hard, or what part of this task is making them feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
Yes. So, like, when you say it's not necessarily like a kid being a kid kind of bad things, but like maybe repeated things that are happening, like when there's always an issue around like brushing teeth, or like the same repeated things over and over again. Those are kind of,
and that's the key, right? Because kids, especially toddlers, and then school age, right? Like, we as parents know that like kids are hard. I mean, you know, a lot of these behaviors can be very typical, but I always tell parents that the thing that differentiates like a kid being a kid or being challenging at any point in time versus needing to address this with somebody who specializes in, you know, whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, is that, you know, the kids who see me, it's consistent enough where it impacts their ability to get through that part of the day, or maybe even to get through an entire day, you know, like where families are so, like parents are feeling really stressed and it's like, I've tried everything and nothing's working. I need someone to help me, you know? So I always say, like, if your child is not responsive to like kind of basic strategies that you could find on Google or from your mommy friends, and you're really feeling like certain parts of your day are so stressful that it's hard to get through when you find yourself kind of feeling anxious about those routines, like that's the time to reach out to a professional.
And that's why I thought it was so important to have you on, because I mean, how many families are there out there that don't know about services like yourself? I mean, do most children that you see like IEPs or certain interventions at school, or that might be like a referral to someone like yourself?
So I would say the majority of my referrals are coming from, you know, our pediatrician recommended OT, or my teacher recommended OT, or, you know, I was talking with my friend and she suggested I call you. But another interesting thing is I think that the majority of people who even know what occupational therapy is, because there's many families that are like, what is that? You know, but the majority of families that come to me think that it's just fine motor, you know, using my hand skills, because you know, if their kids are school aged, they're used to the OTs working on things like fine motor stuff. How do I hold my pencil? How do I write? But what I specialize in is, again, that sensory processing, emotional dysregulation, participation in some of those home routines. So a lot of families, like, I'm not their first I think line of support. They are the families that go to like PT or speech for something, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, no, once they start working with them, they're like, you need to go see Miss Kelly. I think that there's like a sensory underpinning to this. There's lots of different, I think, pathways that lead to me, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I heard you mention a couple sensory disorders going on around like mealtime, and I know I hear this a lot, especially when like kids in cooking classes will use things like banana or yogurt or just certain things that I understand, because I know sometimes it can be common even in adults sometimes where they have an aversion to certain like consistencies. But how does that show up, and how do you work with children who have sensory sensitivities when it comes to food?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's kind of a loaded question too.
Yeah.
So when we think about sensory processing, there are the very obvious senses, right? Like our sense of sight, our sense of touch, our sense of smell, our sense of hearing. But then there's also something called proprioception, which is like our awareness of where our body is in space. Mm-hmm. And then there is another sense called the vestibular system, which gives us information about how our body is moving. Mm-hmm. So when a child is having challenges at mealtime, what we do at Motivated Kids is we actually assess all of those sensory areas. And then, motor skills associated with it as well. But so it could be different for any kid. And what we really want to look at is what part of this mealtime routine is this child basically is preventing this child from, sitting and eating at the table, or trying new foods, or even tolerating new foods at the table. So for some kids, it might look like, oh, we just can't get him to the table. He doesn't sit still. I feel like I'm, spoon fooding him on the go and chasing him around the house. We've tried everything, first, and in that case, I would want to look at, okay, like, does he understand where his body is? Does his body know how to sit still, right? And so we would come up with strategies for that. But then, for other kids, it could be the sound of the way that dad chews with his mouth open that really makes him feel uncomfortable, which sounds pretty crazy. But like for kids that have true sensory processing challenges, it can be like trying to eat while listening to like, the garbage truck. Yeah. Sitting next to you, is it that the child doesn't feel comfortable touching things with his hands or his skin? Like a lot of these kids have challenges with messy play, at school or at home, or they don't like to get dirty. They're like the neat freaks that, like, as soon as something touches their skin, they're like, I need to wash my hands. Yeah. Or wipe it, or is it that the child is really sensitive to certain smells, or even the way certain things look? Like I literally have kids that if they even look at a food that's non-preferred, they will start gagging. And so the longer that you go through that experience with food, you start to build this really kind of negative relationship around food, right? And that, like, as a child, being at that table and seeing new foods does not make me feel good. And so then basically the nervous system and the sensory system goes into like safety mode and is basically like, get that away from me. I just want to stick to what I know I'm always going to like. So a lot of our kids are, they only eat, a small repertoire of foods, or maybe they only eat a small number of food groups. So it's all about kind of figuring out, okay, why is this happening? And I always tell families, and this will be good for families listening too, our rule of thumb is we want to have at least 3 foods in each food group that the child will eat, right? So we want to make sure that they're able to eat at least 3 vegetables. They're able to eat 3 fruits, because kids, and then, proteins and carbs, kids go through these periods of fussiness, especially at like age 2, kids tend to get more picky. But if you start to notice that they're starting to eliminate certain food groups or certain, textures of food to a point where they no longer have those 3 foods in each food groups, that's where you want to start to intervene.
Okay, that's a great tip. I love how you said that. Just like try to find 3 foods in each food group that they can stick to. So maybe if they're uncomfortable going out of that realm, they can feel safe with those foods, and you can feel confident giving your child what they need every day. So that's a really excellent tip.
Yeah.
And I know this kind of feeds into our next question, but I was going to ask, are there any other tips that you wanted to share with families who might have those picky eaters at home?
So like that's, for people that might be listening and they're like, well, we don't have that and I don't know how to get there, so the whole idea at Motivated Kids is that, and this is behind everything that we work with, right? We want kids to be motivated to do these things, right? We want them to have this intrinsic sense of like, I want to do that, I can do that, and I'm going to feel good doing that, right? So when it comes to food, we want children to first and foremost is to develop a positive relationship and a positive experience surrounding mealtime, surrounding being around foods. That doesn't mean like plugging in the iPad and letting them watch TV while they eat to distract them, but like actually like when there are no electronics or screens or foods, can they tolerate even being around them, right? So I think, to name a few tips, one way to do that is you want to kind of see like, okay, if my child only eats 1 vegetable or my child only eats 1 fruit, if I bring a new fruit that's kind of similar, right? So let's think in terms of like, okay, my child eats apples, right? What other fruits have a similar texture or have a similar look, right? So that could be a pear. If I put a pear on my child's plate or next to my plate, can they tolerate looking at it? So we follow this kind of hierarchy where the child tolerates looking at it, then the child is able to tolerate smelling it, they're able to tolerate touching it, they're able to tolerate bringing it near their face, they're able to tolerate putting it in their mouth without the expectation of swallowing, and then we start to work toward, like managing it in their mouth. So those are like generally the stages. Every kid is different, so not every kid will be able to, progress with that type of approach. But I do recommend that families kind of explore that with their child. Like, at what point, if I follow this hierarchy, does my child say no? And then that would be where you want to start to intervene. If it's that they tolerate, all of those things all the way up to touch, then maybe our goal is let's kiss the pear one time and then we can have a bite of the apple, So just, again, like no expectation of eating it, but just interacting with it in some way that they feel in control and that they feel comfortable with. And then maybe we do that every single day or, every snack time. And then maybe we progress to licking it, and can we tolerate that taste? So that is like following that hierarchy is a really great like starting point to figure out where you need to start with your child. Even thinking about, again, like what foods are they interested in now? What foods will they eat? And what food do I wish that they would eat? So another approach can be like doing something called food chaining. And that's where, again, you look at what foods is the child already eating, and then you try to figure out what other foods have similar colors or textures or tastes. So in the example of like my child eats an apple, maybe the next food you want to try is a pear. then, because those are both kind of like juicy, slightly crunchy textures, then maybe you might want to move to a grape, right? A green grapes, because pears are green and grapes have the same color, So that's another approach. But some kids don't even need that. Some kids just need some kind of visual to even try a new food, So for some kids, it could be as simple as like, I'm going to take, a piece of paper and I'm going to draw 3 circles. And, I want you to take 3 bites of, or maybe like eat 3 pieces of this small orange that's cut up into different chunks, into small chunks. And then you can have a bite of the apple. And then, so for some kids, it's just even just having a visual, right? Like, I don't expect you to eat this whole fruit, but I do want you to try it. So look, if you try 3 bites, or maybe even just 1 bite, then we can have a bite of apple. So it can even be as simple as that, just giving them a visual and seeing, once they do take that bite, how do they react? Is it, this was better than I thought it was going to be, or is it like, gagging, which would be more concerning.
Yeah. Okay, so that's called food chaining, right?
Yeah, food chaining, and then just even like asking the child, like, giving the child a visual in terms of how many pieces that you expect him to eat. That and going off of that too, like, if you are presenting a non-preferred food, it's always, and your child is going to resist it or avoid it. It's always good to think about like the amount that you're presenting them with, because sometimes when a kid sees like, let's say a whole pear or a whole banana, then it's like, oh, no way, get that away from me, right? Yeah. But sometimes if you just put like 3 slices or maybe even 1 slice, your child might be willing to interact with it more. So that's that visual support.
Yeah, no, I love that. So that alone, for someone who's listening who might be a little bit overwhelmed with their picky eater, I think that these 4 tips, where it's at least making sure that your child is having at least 3 foods in each food group that they can feel comfortable with, slowly introducing new foods by food chaining, right, by having foods that are similar, and then a visual element also that can be supportive, which is great because, everyone's a different learner and different.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up today? I think that these tips are amazing alone.
I think just in terms of, what I see from a lot of parents that come to work with me, and I encourage other parents to do at home, is if your child truly is a picky eater, and again, like, there are very few foods in their diet that they're willing to eat, or very few healthy foods that they're willing to eat, really just trying to make it a positive experience when those foods are around. Reminding yourself to take a deep breath and reminding yourself to not make it feel so pressured, because the more our children react negatively around that food, which sometimes can be exacerbated when they feel pressured, the more they're going to resist it. So even just modeling, with your own body language, this pear is so juicy, or it's so sweet. Do you like the way that tastes, Dad? So just remembering that, like, just even sometimes just modeling in front of them how to interact with that food, or how you would love one day for them to interact with that food is really therapeutic in itself. So really just kind of trying to take the stress out of that overall.
Yes.
And I know this for myself with my own daughter, like, we are so quick to, what's wrong with you? Or why can't you do that? Or you need to do this, So whenever there's a challenge, that kind of negative reinforcement kind of happens. Not that we intend to do that, but, sometimes the challenges that our children are having create challenges within ourselves and make us feel, stressed or dysregulated or anxious. But, so always remembering to praise them for trying. Like, oh, I'm so proud of you. You licked that. Great job.
Yeah.
And that was really brave of you. And, I'm really proud of you for trying something new. How does that feel? Are you proud of yourself? So remembering to, even if it's not what you had hoped to achieve by the end of that meal or the end of that snack, praising them for a very specific thing that you're proud of them for doing.
Yes, instead of eat all that food or no dessert or no screen time.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so just baby steps and acknowledging that they just might need a little bit of support at mealtime, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, well, it was so nice chatting with you today, Kelly. For people that want to hear more about you and what you do and how to get in contact with you, how can they go about doing that?
Sure. So I have a website, and that is www.motivated-kids.com. They can also, on that website, actually, I have a list where parents can, look at different areas that we work on and some, things that they might observe. So that's a really great place for parents to go initially, because a lot of times families will be like, I don't know if you can help with this, but... And then I also get a lot of parents that are like, I saw your website, and it was the first time that I actually saw all of these things in the same place. I think you can help me, So that's a great place to start. Parents can also reach out to me by email, and that would be motivatedkidsllc@gmail.com. And then you can, of course, find us on Instagram at Motivated Kids or on Facebook at Motivated-Kids.
Well, this has been so great. I know there's going to be a lot of families that are interested in this. And thank you again for being here, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.